Announcer bot is active. The race session is at Adelaide 2011. David Kelsall is P15 on softs, 0.6 seconds ahead of Mark Scott. Rene Robertson is P1 on softs, 0.4 seconds ahead of Daniel Hanke. Brian Patterson is P3 on softs, 0.8 seconds ahead of Philip Didman. Rene Robertson is P1, 0.3 seconds ahead of Daniel Hanke. Brian Patterson is P3, 0.3 seconds ahead of Philip Didman. Rene Robertson is P1, 0.4 seconds ahead of Daniel Hanke. Brian Patterson is P3, 0.2 seconds ahead of Philip Didman. Rene Robertson is P1, 0.3 seconds ahead of Daniel Hanke. Brian Patterson is P3, 0.5 seconds ahead of Philip Didman. Rene Robertson is P1, 0.6 seconds ahead of Daniel Hanke. Brian Patterson is P3, 0.2 seconds ahead of Philip Didman. Rene Robertson is P1, 0.7 seconds ahead of Daniel Hanke. Brian Patterson is P4, 0.1 seconds behind Philip Didman. Rene Robertson is P1, 0.9 seconds ahead of Daniel Hanke. Richard Ogden is P14 on softs. David Forsyth from Ireland is P5 on softs, 0.5 seconds ahead of Simon Cham. John Astrop from New Zealand is P13 on softs. Mark Scott from Norway is P7 on supers, 0.1 seconds ahead of David Kelsall. John Astrop is P13. Kieran Cheng from Hong Kong is P11 on softs, 0.6 seconds behind Bruce Hardwick. Mark Scott is P8, 0.8 seconds behind David Kelsall. David Forsyth is P5, 1.0 seconds ahead of Simon Cham. Kieran Cheng is P11, 0.1 seconds behind Bruce Hardwick. Daniel Handke from Germany is P2 on softs, 2.1 seconds behind Rene Robertson. Kieran Chen is P11, 0.8 seconds behind Bruce Hardwick. Daniel Handke is P2, 3.6 seconds behind Rene Robertson. John Astrup is P13. Hugo Gomez is P11 on softs, 0.1 seconds ahead of Bruce Hardwick. Mark Scott is P8, 1.7 seconds ahead of Nick Carney. Hugo Gomez is P12, 0.3 seconds behind Bruce Hardwick. Mark Scott is P8, 1.0 seconds behind David Kelsall. Hugo Gomez entering the pits after 5 laps on softs is P12. Hugo Gomez entering the pits is P12. David Forsyth is P5, 2.7 seconds ahead of Simon Champ. Mark Scott is P8, 0.7 seconds behind David Kelsall. Bruce Hardwick entering the pits after 6 laps on supers is P11. John Astrup entering the pits after 6 laps on softs is P12. Hugo Gomez is P13. Simon Champ entering the pits after 7 laps on supers is P6. Mark Scott is P8, 1.3 seconds behind David Kelsall. Kieran Chen is P10. Hugo Gomez is P12 0.9 seconds behind Bruce Hardwick. Kieran Chen is P9 3.2 seconds behind Nick Carney. Rene Robertson is P1. Kieran Chen is P8 0.6 seconds ahead of Nick Carney. Hugo Gomez is P12 0.6 seconds behind Bruce Hardwick. Rene Robertson is P1. Hugo Gomez is P12 0.5 seconds behind Bruce Hardwick. Kieran Chen is P7 3.0 seconds ahead of David Kelsall. Richard Ogden entering the pits after 8 laps on Supers is P14. Hugo Gomez is P12 0.3 seconds behind Bruce Hardwick. Daniel Handke entering the pits after 9 laps on softs is P2. Daniel Handke entering the pits is P2. Daniel Handke entering the pits is P2. Philip Dittman entering the pits after 9 laps on softs is P4. John Astrup is P13 on Supers. Hugo Gomez is P12 0.5 seconds behind Bruce Hardwick. Bruce Hardwick is P12 on softs 2.4 seconds behind Hugo Gomez. Mark Scott entering the pits after 10 laps on Supers is P6. Nick Carney entering the pits after 10 laps on Supers is P9. Hugo Gomez is P11 1.9 seconds ahead of Bruce Hardwick. Richard Ogden is P14 on Supers. Hugo Gomez Gomez is P11 1.0 seconds behind Philip Dittman. John Astrup is P13 1.4 seconds behind Bruce Hardwick. Simon Champ is P8 on Supers 2.7 seconds behind David Calsall. Hugo Gomez is P11. Rene Robertson is P1. John Astrup is P12 4.0 seconds behind Hugo Gomez. David Forsyth is P4 2.1 seconds ahead of Philip Dittman. John Astrup is P12. Kieran Chen is P6. David Forsyth is P4 0.5 seconds ahead of Philip Dittman. Daniel Hanke is P2. Rene Robertson is P1. David Forsyth entering the pits after 13 laps on softs is P5. Simon Champ is P8 1.5 seconds behind David Calsall. Bruce Hardwick entering the pits after 6 laps on softs is P13. Daniel Hanke is P2. Kieran Chen is P5. Daniel Hanke is P2. Kieran Chen is P5. Simon Champ is P7 2.2 seconds ahead of David Kelsall. David Kelsall is P8 2.6 seconds behind Simon Champ. Simon Champ is P7 1.2 seconds ahead of David Kelsall. Kieran Chen is P5. Rene Robertson is P1. Simon Champ is P7 2.7 seconds ahead of David Kelsall. Rene Robertson is P1. Simon Champ is P7 2.4 seconds ahead of David Kelsall. Bruce Hardwick is P13. John Astrop is P11 3.2 seconds behind Hugo Gomez. Simon Champ is P7 2.1 seconds ahead of David Kelsall. John Astrop is P11 0.8 seconds behind Hugo Gomez. David Forsyth is P6. Bruce Hardwick is P13. David Forsyth is P6. Simon Champ is P7 2.8 seconds ahead of Nick Carney. John Astrop entering the pits after 10 laps on softs is P11. Rene Robertson is P1. Simon Champ is P7 0.6 seconds ahead of David Kelsall. Rene Robertson is P1. Simon Champ is P7 1.1 seconds ahead of David Kelsall. Rene Robertson is P1. Brian Patterson is P3. Rene Robertson is P1. Simon Champ is P7 0.8 seconds ahead of David Kelsall. Rene Robertson is P1. Hugo Gomez is P10. Simon Champ is P7 2.0 seconds ahead of David Kelsall. Brian Patterson is P3. Kieran Chen is P5. Brian Patterson is P3. Mark Scott is P9 on softs 0.5 seconds behind David Kelsall. Daniel Handke is P2. David Forsyth is P6. Richard Ogden is P12 0.1 seconds ahead of Bruce Hardwick. Bruce Hardwick entering the pits after 4 laps on softs is P13. David Forsyth is P6. Brian Patterson is P3. Philipp Dittmann from Germany is P4 on softs. David Kelsall entering the pits after 19 laps on softs is P9. David Kelsall entering the pits is P9. Brian Patterson is P3. Mark Scott is P8 2.1 seconds behind Simon Champ. Kieran Chen is P5. Richard Ogden entering the pits after 10 laps on supers is P12. Rene Robertson is P1. Mark Scott is P8 1.5 seconds behind Simon Champ. Rene Robertson entering the pits after 21 laps on softs is P1. Richard Ogden is P13. Mark Scott is P8, 5.0 seconds behind Simon Cham. Daniel Handke is P2. Brian Patterson entering the pits after 21 laps on softs is P3. Brian Patterson entering the pits is P3. Brian Patterson entering the pits is P3. Mark Scott is P8. Mark Scott entering the pits after 11 laps on softs is P8. David Kelsall is P10. Hugo Gomez is P9. Daniel Handke is P2. Kieran Chen entering the pits after 22 laps on softs is P5. Hugo Gomez is P8. Brian Patterson is P4 on Supers, 0.9 seconds behind Philip Didman. Hugo Gomez is P8. Brian Patterson is P4, 0.2 seconds behind Philip Didman. Richard Ogden is P13. Brian Patterson is P3, 0.6 seconds ahead of Philip Didman. Richard Ogden is P13. Brian Patterson is P3, 0.8 seconds ahead of Philip Didman. David Forsyth is P5. Brian Patterson is P3, 0.8 seconds ahead of Philip Didman. Rene Robertson is P1 on Supers. Brian Patterson is P3, 0.6 seconds ahead of Philip Didman. Hugo Gomez is P8. Rene Robertson is P1. Brian Patterson is P3. Daniel Handke entering the pits after 16 laps on softs is P2. David Forsyth is P6, 0.4 seconds behind Kieran Chen. Hugo Gomez is P8, 3.6 seconds behind Simon Champ. David Forsyth is P6, 1.5 seconds behind Kieran Chen. Hugo Gomez is P8, 2.9 seconds behind Simon Champ. David Forsyth is P6, 0.8 seconds behind Kieran Chen. Daniel Handke is P2 on Supers. Hugo Gomez is P8, 0.1 seconds behind Simon Champ. Rene Robertson is P1. Bruce Hardwick is P12. Simon Champ is P8, 4.2 seconds behind Hugo Gomez. David Forsyth is P6, 2.4 seconds behind Kieran Chen. Simon Champ is P8, 4.4 seconds behind Hugo Gomez. Hugo Gomez is P7, 3.5 seconds ahead of Simon Champ. Brian Patterson is P3. Hugo Gomez is P7. Simon Champ is P8. The leader has just finished the race. Rene Robertson is P1. Richard Ogden is P13. Hugo Gomez is P8. Daniel Handke is P2. Mark Scott is P9. Rene Robertson is P1. Nick Carney is P11. David Kelsall is P10. David Kelsall is P10. Kieran Cheng is P5. Richard Ogden is P13. David Forsyth is P6. David Kelsall is P10. Philip Dittman is P4. Bruce Hardwick is P12. David Forsyth is P5. Philip Dittman is P4. Brian Patterson is P3. Hugo Gomez is P8. Philip Dittman is P4. Bruce Hardwick is P12. Simon Champ is P7. Hugo Gomez is P8. Rene Robertson is P1. David Forsyth is P6. John Astrop is P8. Brian Patterson is P2. John Astrop is P8. Brian Patterson is P2. Daniel Handke is P4. Mark Scott is P11. Brian Patterson is P2. David Forsyth is P6. Daniel Handke is P4. John Astrop is P6. Hugo Gomez is P8. David Forsyth is P5. Brian Patterson is P2. David Forsyth is P5. Mark Scott is P11. Hugo Gomez is P8. David Forsyth is P5. Simon Champ is P14. David Forsyth is P5. Simon Champ is P14. John Astrop is P6. Mark Scott is P10. Philip Dittman is P4. David Forsyth is P5. Brian Patterson is P3. Mark Scott is P10. David Forsyth is P6. Mark Scott is P9. David Forsyth is P9. Philip Dittman is P6. Brian Patterson is P3. David Kelsall is P7. Mark Scott is P8. Brian Patterson is P3. Mark Scott is P7. Brian Patterson is P3. Hugo Gomez is P9. John Astrop is P4. Kieran Chen is P10. Brian Patterson is P2. Kieran Chen is P10. Brian Patterson is P2. Hugo Gomez is P9. John Astrop is P4. Hugo Gomez is P9. David Forsyth is P12. Hugo Gomez is P9. David Forsyth is P12. Brian Patterson is P2. David Forsyth is P12. Brian Patterson is P2. Richard Ogden is P6. John Astrop is P4. Daniel Handke is P4. John Astrop is P3. Mark Scott is P7. John Astrop is P3. Bruce Hardwick is P10. John Astrop is P3. Bruce Hardwick is P10. David Forsyth is P12. Brian Patterson is P1. David Forsyth is P12. David Kelsall is P10. David Forsyth is P12. Hugo Gomez is P6. David Forsyth is P12. John Astrop is P4. Rene Robertson is P2. Kieran Chen is P8. John Astrop is P4. David Forsyth is P12. Rene Robertson is P2. John Astrop is P4. Mark Scott is P5. Philip Dittman is P9. Hugo Gomez is P6. John Astrop is P4. Hugo Gomez is P6. David Kelsall is P10. Bruce Hardwick is P11. Kieran Cheng is P7. Rene Robertson is P2. Mark Scott is P5. John Astrop is P4. Simon Champ is P13. Mark Scott is P5. Simon Champ is P13. Brian Patterson is P1. Kieran Cheng is P7. Simon Champ is P13. Mark Scott is P5. David Forsyth is P12. Mark Scott is P5. Simon Champ is P13. David Forsyth is P12. Kieran Cheng is P8. Rene Robertson is P2. David Kelsall is P10. Kieran Cheng is P8. Daniel Handke is P2. David Forsyth is P11. Brian Patterson is P1. Bruce Hardwick is P12. Simon Champ is P13. David Forsyth is P11. Simon Champ is P13. Philip Dittman is P9. Hugo Gomez is P5. Simon Champ is P13. Brian Patterson is P1. Mark Scott is P6. John Astrop is P4. Kieran Chen is P10. Philip Dittman is P8. Kieran Cheng is P10. David Kelsall is P9. David Forsyth is P11. Hugo Gomez is P5. Daniel Handke is P2. John Astrop is P4. David Forsyth is P10. John Astrop is P4. Rene Robertson is P3. Hugo Gomez is P5. David Kelsall is P10. Simon Champ is P13. Rene Robertson is P3. Bruce Hardwick is P11. John Astrop is P4. Bruce Hardwick is P11. Daniel Handke is P2. Bruce Hardwick is P11. Brian Patterson is P1. Rene Robertson is P3. Brian Patterson is P1. Simon Champ is P12. Brian Patterson is P1. Mark Scott is P6. Brian Patterson is P1. Rene Robertson is P3. Brian Patterson is P1. Richard Ogden is P7. Brian Patterson is P1. Daniel Handke is P2. Brian Patterson is P1. Hugo Gomez is P5. Brian Patterson is P1. John Astrop is P4. Brian Patterson is P2. Daniel Handke is P1. Brian Patterson is P2. David Forsyth is P9. David Kelsall is P10. David Forsyth is P9. John Astrop is P4. Philip Dittman is P8. Rene Robertson is P3. John Astrop is P4. David Forsyth is P9. David Kelsall is P10. Richard Ogden is P7. John Astrop is P4. Philip Dittman is P8. Brian Patterson is P2. Mark Scott is P6. Richard Ogden is P7. David Kelsall is P10. Richard Ogden is P7. David Forsyth is P9. Richard Ogden is P7. David Forsyth is P9. Richard Ogden is P8. Daniel Handke is P1. John Astrup is P5. Bruce Hardwick is P11. Daniel Handke is P1. Bruce Hardwick is P11. Daniel Handke is P1. Bruce Hardwick is P11. Simon Champ is P12. Philip Dittman is P7. Mark Scott is P6. Simon Champ is P12. Mark Scott is P6. Hugo Gomez is P4. Mark Scott is P6. Rene Robertson is P3. Simon Champ is P12. Brian Patterson is P2. Bruce Hardwick is P11. Daniel Handke is P1. Bruce Hardwick is P11. Mark Scott is P6. Bruce Hardwick is P11. Daniel Handke is P1. Bruce Hardwick is P11. Daniel Handke is P1. Bruce Hardwick is P11. Rene Robertson is P2. Brian Patterson is P3. Rene Robertson is P2. Daniel Handke is P1. Rene Robertson is P3. Simon Champ is P12. Rene Robertson is P2. David Forsyth is P8. Rene Robertson is P2. Richard Ogden is P7. Bruce Hardwick is P11. Rene Robertson is P2. John Astrop is P4. Rene Robertson is P2. John Astrop is P4. John Astrop is P4. Rene Robertson is P1. David Kelsall is P9.